The night on 24, the U.S. is waiting for the Islamic Republic's answer, all while stressing that maximum pressure on Tehran will continue. The U.S. intelligence community has told the White House that Iran can resist a U.S. naval blockade for months.
We also chatted with him about various topics for about 2 hours.
Iran international sources say the claim of Masoud Pezeshkian's first meeting with Mojtaba Khamenei is completely made up. Fresh reports highlight Saudi Arabia and Kuwait's roles in U.S. operations in the Strait of Hormuz. NBC reports Riyadh's refusal to open its airspace halted Trump's Operation Freedom project.
From the Iran International Studio, this is 24 with Fardad Farahzad. This is top breaking news.
Hello and good evening to Iran international viewers in Iran and, all around the world. So before we start the news, we've got some breaking news that just reached us moments ago. In one of the most important developments of recent days in the Persian Gulf, Saudi Arabia and Kuwait have, lifted the restrictions they had on the U.S. military using their airbase and airspace. It was reported earlier that one of the reasons the U.S. had stopped Operation Freedom for ships in the Persian Gulf was because these countries weren't cooperating. Now it's being said that those restrictions that became a serious obstacle for Washington after the U.S. operation started to keep the Strait of Hormuz open, well, they're going to be lifted. This is a report that Reuters and the Wall Street Journal just published moments ago. The Wall Street Journal is saying that according to U.S. and Saudi officials, the Trump administration is now looking into resuming the operation called Operation Freedom, which is a plan that's supposed to escort and protect commercial ships from potential threats from Iran. So just about 48 hours after the U.S. president said he was stopping this operation, now the Wall Street Journal and Reuters are reporting that Kuwait and Saudi Arabia are, once again going to let the United States use their airspace and territory to do this operation. Meanwhile, the Islamic Republic is saying it's reviewing U.S. messages and proposals with Pakistan mediating, but no final decision or official response has been given to Washington yet. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has expressed hope for progress in negotiations, but he said that any agreement is contingent on serious restrictions on Iran's nuclear program. At the same time, a recent report from the Washington Post reveals that the CIA has officially told the White House that Iran can resist a coordinated naval blockade for at least 3 to 4 months before it finally faces severe economic pressure. This intelligence assessment is unfolding while the U.S. Treasury Department also publicly announced just an hour ago that it has imposed strict new sanctions related to the Islamic Republic. These financial penalties serve as part of the ongoing maximum pressure campaign. To discuss this, my colleague Samira Garai has joined us live from the White House. Samira, I don't know if you heard the breaking news we just mentioned moments ago or not, but now there are circulating reports that both Saudi Arabia and Kuwait are, going to let the United States use their airspace and territory to fully restart Operation Freedom. This pivotal development could naturally change things a lot on the ground, especially since it's currently being reported in Iran that officials in Tehran are, carefully reviewing America's latest response.
That's right, it is. Fardad, the Wall Street Journal has published this exclusive report, and it's saying that those restrictions Saudi Arabia and Kuwait had put in place, well, those restrictions are gone. And it's possible that Operation Freedom might, be implemented again in the next few days, that the U.S. government might want to restart it. It's not clear what happened in the meantime. Let me just go back to yesterday evening, our time here in the eastern U.S. NBC came out and gave a reason why Mr. Trump stopped Operation Freedom. They said it was because these Persian Gulf countries didn't, hear from Mr. Trump in time. Right after Mr. Trump came out on Sunday and wrote on social media that he suddenly wanted to implement Operation Freedom, these allied countries only then found out. They're, obviously really upset with the United States over the lack of communication. That is exactly why they refused to let the U.S. use their regional air bases. Specifically, for example, they blocked access to Prince Sultan in Saudi Arabia, refusing to let a military use its airspace and territory to actually carry out Operation Freedom. NBC originally reported this exact situation. I-24 then came around and confirmed it again in a different way, with, even more exclusive details. Now, in the recent reports, what the Wall Street Journal is saying is that Saudi Arabia closely looked at how the UAE was brutally attacked by the Islamic Republic on Monday and Tuesday. They observed how very little importance or urgency the United States gave to these concerning attacks, and how much it, stubbornly insisted that absolutely no significant tension had occurred in the region that would make us actually want to resume military attacks. Exactly these words were, heard on Tuesday at the Pentagon press conference, that the ceasefire hasn't been broken, and America's threshold of tolerance, hasn't been breached by any of these operations that have happened for us to move towards another operation. Because of all this, these countries decided to close their skies and land. Now, the Wall Street Journal is saying that the lifting of restrictions is gone and Operation Freedom might, be resumed again. It's not clear what's been happening, but we're not in the loop. We're not in the loop. We will have to carefully see if something like that actually happens or not. Right now, in the strictly monitored past 24 hours, almost no commercial tanker or heavy cargo ship has passed through the Persian Gulf, specifically through the Strait of Hormuz. And fortunately, no new incident has occurred either, except for yesterday, which, we heard today that CENTCOM deployed an F-18 and targeted that specific tanker that had the Islamic Republic's flag and was heading towards Iranian ports. We definitely have that one isolated incident, but otherwise, absolutely no maritime traffic has happened. Despite the rising regional tensions, Mr. Trump is still hopeful he can, reach a lasting agreement. CNN sources had said that the Islamic Republic would respond today. It was expected that the U.S. government would receive it, but Ismail Baghai came and said there's no news, and we haven't prepared a response yet. Mr. Arakchi was in Beijing, and when he was returning to Tehran, some said he might want to make a short stop in Islamabad. Given the news that the Islamic Republic's response would be submitted today, well, it was expected that he would want to deliver this response in person, but he spoke by phone with his Pakistani counterpart, Ishaq Dar. Recently, the Qataris called the Pakistanis, though the precise content of these confidential calls isn't entirely clear. Behind the scenes, these kinds of strategic political movements are quietly continuing. There's genuine hope for reaching a general understanding, but Mr. Trump's upcoming trip to China is a very important factor in all of this. Currently, there's a complex diplomatic struggle happening to ensure Mr. Trump goes to Beijing in an atmosphere of peace and mutual understanding. Furthermore, Israel's Channel 12 says if it doesn't happen, and Mr. Trump goes on the trip and comes back without success, the military option will once again be strictly on the table after Trump's trip to Beijing.
Thank you. Samira Garai was with us from the White House in Washington, D.C. An hour ago, the U.S. representative to the UN, Mike Waltz, also accused the Islamic Republic of threatening global trade and said Iran must remove the mines from the Strait of Hormuz and stop collecting tolls from ships. Mr. Waltz at a joint press conference of the U.S. and Arab countries of the Persian Gulf regarding the draft resolution on the Strait of Hormuz said Tehran's actions are paving the way for the destruction of global trade.
Iran's indiscriminate mining
الان ایران داره به صورت بی‌تمایز مینگذاری میکنه و میخواد که اونجا عوارض بگیره. اینها مصداق بارز نقض قانون بین الملل هستند، قوانین دریانوردی، قوانین تجارت دریایی، و اینها مغایر قطعنامه‌های همین شورای امنیت هستند. همچنین کنوانسیون سازمان ملل در مورد قوانین دریا، کنوانسیون لاهه شماره 13، احکام دیوان بین‌المللی داوری، دیوان بین‌المللی کیفری، حکم موسوم به کرفو و البته قطعنامه 2817 شورای امنیت که با یک اکثریت قاطعی از کشورهای عضو به تصویب رسید.
Alireza Namour Hagiki, an insightful political analyst based in Toronto, has just joined us for today's discussion. Mr. Namour Hagiki, this newly proposed text that Mr. Waltz recently read alongside representatives of other Persian Gulf countries seemed to be a remarkably precise text, without much of the usual ambiguity found in previous texts they had prepared. This clearly articulated document might make it considerably more difficult for Russian Federation and China to justify a veto. In this roller coaster that keeps going up and down, do you see this on the horizon, that an alliance might form through the United States by the Gulf Cooperation Council countries for a meaningful confrontation with Iran's movements?
Yes, hello to you, dear Mr. Farahzad, and to the viewers and listeners of Iran International Television. Naturally, the issue of the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz has very significant effects on the global economy, and naturally the US, well, it can't easily solve it. I mean, it's not something that can only be solved with a war. It needs both a global alliance and the ability to create an international diplomatic consensus to force Iran to retreat. From a strictly military perspective, the United States alone cannot accomplish this monumental task. While the proposed freedom operation they recently mentioned might be able to create some temporary strategic openings, it generally cannot fully resolve the deep-rooted issue of the Strait of Hormuz and the persistent dangers to international commercial shipping. Now, we must wait and see exactly how much global coordination will materialize the longer this crisis continues, given its severe cascading effects on the vital economies of Europe, Southeast Asia, and various Arab countries, the greater the possibility of a unified multinational alliance forming. But at the same time, the US also has time constraints. And this is because Mr. Trump came for a short-term project with maximum achievement. But his goals are, 1, Iran's unconditional surrender, changing the Islamic Republic. Now, according to him, it has changed, but in a different way. And also being able to resolve 2 issues, to remove uranium from Iran and the Strait of Hormuz, which has now been added. He must do these 2, and these 2 cannot happen with war. It's not an easy task. And well, as you see, the only way is to create consensus and diplomatic pressure, or even the cooperation of Russia and China, to be able to resolve this issue.
The GCC countries are in a very difficult position. Isn't that right, Mr. Nanvor Hagigi? On one hand, well, they are sitting in glass towers and are very close to mainland Iran. And we've seen many times in recent weeks and months that Iran has attacked their infrastructure resources, their energy facilities. But at the same time, perhaps they will never find the Islamic Republic this weak again in the coming years. It seems that they currently have a rather short window of opportunity. Do you think they will use this period for renewed hostility in striking the Islamic Republic, or will they instead actively seek a diplomatic rapprochement with Tehran?
Well, it entirely depends on exactly what their internal security and defense assessment currently is. If they truly think the US can come in and win decisively, naturally they'll move towards regime change. They'll support it wholeheartedly. But if their understanding is that the US might abandon the military operation halfway through, well, they'll act much more cautiously to avoid risks. Securing victory in this type of complex operation must definitely involve deploying extensive ground forces. Before, like 2 years ago, the Arab nations had clearly told America during Mr. Biden's term. They said, if you want to come into the Persian Gulf and it's a matter of absolute security, you have to come in full force. It essentially becomes a half-hearted empire where you just assassinate leaders without really following through on the aftermath. And an assassinated emperor who isn't completely gone poses the absolute worst danger for maintaining stability in the region. It was like the exact term they had used previously for Mr. Austin. So right now, I think they're also closely looking at the kind of thing America genuinely wants to do. If their basic understanding is that Mr. Trump might, abruptly abandon the whole thing due to certain considerations, like go deliver a heavy military blow and then just completely leave, well, naturally, they won't get too deeply involved in the game. But if the prevailing understanding is that Mr. Trump is willing to act decisively at any price and at any cost, especially through the deployment of ground forces, then regional allies might fully support him. Ultimately, their backing just depends on what their assessment of Mr. Trump's military actions will actually entail. At the same time, it is crucial to recognize that Iran, compared to the past, has gained a few vital geopolitical advantages. One major shift is that Tehran has gained unprecedented confidence in confronting direct threats, an edge it didn't have to this extent before. Secondly, from an intelligence and operational standpoint, Iran possesses capabilities to hit neighboring Arab states more effectively. It has now acquired advanced satellite information. The third crucial point is that both Russia and China are currently significantly more support to Iran. While they do not do so openly, they are secretly backing Iran much more heavily than they did in the past. This shift occurred because their initial assumption was that the Iranian regime simply could not last and would quickly collapse, particularly within the first 10 days. Nevertheless, Iran still possesses critical weaknesses, most notably its deeply fragile economic situation. there are increasingly evident challenges within Iran's complex power bloc. A clear example of this friction was witnessed during the Pakistan negotiations. Upon his return from these talks, a significant disagreement erupted between Mr. Ghalibaf and other rival factions. Subsequently, Mr. Ali Bagheri drafted a critical report detailing the specific nature and topics of Mr. Ghalibaf's negotiations. In fact, this report practically forced Mr. Ghalibaf to completely set aside from entering these negotiations for now, primarily because it exposed that he did not possess full authority. And the third crucial point is that, socially and politically, the prolonged continuation of a neither war nor peace status quo inevitably brings these very domestic problems, because it increasingly seems that the ongoing negotiations are completely deadlocked, especially concerning uranium enrichment. The only possible thing they might agree on is a mutual halt to operations, and that is for both sides regarding Persian Gulf shipping. Iran releases the Strait of Hormuz, and they also release the blockade of Iran. This maritime compromise is currently the only thing they might agree on. They haven't reached a fundamental agreement regarding enrichment levels and lifting economic sanctions.
Thank you, Ali Reza Namvor Hagigi, political analyst from Toronto. France's foreign minister says that until the Strait of Hormuz is reopened, he will not accept any lifting of international sanctions against the Islamic Republic. Jean-Noël Carrot has said that Iran is seeking a reduction in sanctions in exchange for concessions in its nuclear program, but Paris considers this out of the question under current circumstances. This comes as the aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle previously moved towards the Strait of Hormuz to strengthen shipping security if needed. The movement of this carrier is part of a joint mission between France and Britain aimed at restoring maritime security in the Strait of Hormuz. Our correspondent, Nilufar Pour Ibrahim, is with us from Paris. Nilufar, can this be interpreted in a way as a change in Paris's tone, which had a somewhat more conciliatory approach in recent weeks?
France is still, in talks with officials of the Islamic Republic. France's foreign minister, just 2 days ago, spoke with Abbas Araghchi, the Islamic Republic's foreign minister. And we know that Emmanuel Macron himself is constantly in contact with Masoud Pezeshkian, but he still wants to maintain his firm stance, and worried that concessions might be given to the Islamic Republic, while a series of problems remain unresolved. For France at this critical stage, although Iran's nuclear program remains undeniably important, its escalating ballistic missile development and destabilizing regional activities are highly concerning. France is deeply worried about the security of its strategic allies across the Middle East. However, ensuring the free flow of maritime traffic through the Strait of Hormuz has gained an even higher priority. Consequently, France's foreign minister is explicitly pointing out that if a new diplomatic agreement is reached, strict conditions must apply. Until this agreement is rigorously and specifically controlled, rather than merely reviewed. And on the other hand, until the Strait of Hormuz is fully reopened to secure international trade, not even a single economic sanction against Iran should be lifted. Even before this recent development, we had heard a very similar stance from French officials regarding the potential implementation of sanctions. Now, however, France's military activities have significantly increased in the region. As you mentioned, the aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle and the naval ships accompanying it have now successfully passed through the Suez Canal. They are currently navigating the Red Sea and will soon enter the strategic waters of the Gulf of Aden to be stationed there, if deemed necessary, and if the Strait of Hormuz is ultimately reopened, they will officially start that joint naval operation, which they have been coordinating with Britain for some time. Anyway, this issue is incredibly important for France. It represents a significant strategic change, in a way. We know that this specific aircraft carrier, before the war started, was actually present in the northern region for a planned military exercise intended for Greenland. After the war started, it was swiftly transferred to the Mediterranean Sea to help Cyprus. At that time, French President Emmanuel Macron had firmly said it would stay stationed there. It wasn't supposed to change its position at all. And finally, we see that it has changed its position, and it could end up being costly for France, especially since it wanted to, maintain Europe's security. But now we see it has come to the region, and it's trying to help ensure shipping in the Strait of Hormuz, if, of course, the Strait of Hormuz opens up, because Emmanuel Macron still insists that this ship's mission is purely defensive, and, it won't get involved in operations to open the Strait of Hormuz. In this complex situation, where it remains unclear how it ultimately wants to proceed with this operation, it is highly important for France that the precise fate of Iran's nuclear program is finally determined. Alongside strictly monitoring Iran's nuclear activities, France argues they should also consider its ballistic missile capabilities and regional activities in any ongoing discussions, and it constantly emphasizes this issue, or even heavily warns about it. But, well, anyway, we clearly know that France currently lacks a direct role in these ongoing negotiations between the United States and the Islamic Republic of Iran, even if its diplomatic stance at this stage might be significantly tougher than perhaps the immediate stance the United States might have. Before this, it could play a significant role in the JCPOA, but now it doesn't have such a privileged position. Because of this shift, it seems to have focused primarily on helping to safely control the current situation, in a way. Furthermore, as the foreign minister himself is actively saying, the severe economic conditions created by or directly resulting from the war that has taken place are highly concerning. If it becomes very prolonged, it could easily endanger global stability or broader European security.
Thank you, Nilufar Ebrahim, our correspondent from Paris, for being with us. Before we go to the next news, I should mention that in the past few minutes, Fars news agency says that the sound of several explosions has been heard from around Bandar Abbas in southern Iran. Earlier, some social media users had also published unconfirmed reports, but this is the first time that now official sources affiliated with the Islamic Republic are also announcing that a few minutes ago, the sound of an explosion, several explosions, was heard from around Bandar Abbas, and according to Fars news agency, the origin and exact location of these sounds are still unknown. Based on information received by Iran International, the news of Masoud Pezeshkian's meeting with Mojtaba Khamenei was fake, and no such meeting took place. Senior IRGC officials also, expressing surprise at the publication of this news by the presidential office, said that Pezeshkian is deceiving public opinion with this claim. According to sources, Pezeshkian's office has so far requested a meeting with Mojtaba Khamenei 5 times, but each of those 5 requests has been rejected by Khamenei's office. This is while Masoud Pezeshkian said an hour ago that his meeting with Mojtaba Khamenei took more than 2 hours.
My dear leader, we have arrived. We also had a conversation with him for about 2.5 hours. First of all, I must tell you, his perspective, his manner, he was truly a warm and humble person. For a leader to treat someone like that, he really had that kind of demeanor.
Najat Bahrami, political analyst from Washington, has joined us. Mr. Bahrami, if it's really true that he's falsely claiming to have met with the new leader of the Islamic Republic, why do you think he would say such a thing? What signal does it send us?
Yes, greetings to you and the viewers tuning in. In my professional opinion, the most probable reason for Pezeshkian's statement is a deliberate effort that he and key government officials have considered. Their goal is to effectively remove Mojtaba Khamenei from the exclusive control of that limited hardline IRGC circle. The undeniable fact is that throughout recent months and weeks, their persistent efforts to meet with Mojtaba Khamenei have been entirely fruitless. Ultimately, this blockade has pushed Pezeshkian towards publicly saying such a thing. And just as he predicted, in a way he has in fact checkmated that main circle around Mojtaba Khamenei, those influential IRGC figures. He's put them in a situation where they can't openly deny it. If this is denied, well, it creates a big problem, a big question. And in fact, it confronts the system with more challenges, especially among its own supporters. On the other hand, it is crucial to recognize that in recent months, Pezeshkian has been almost unofficially sidelined from major political power equations. In principle, he had no meaningful place in the high-stakes games related to this ongoing war, the delicate negotiations, and the proposed ceasefire. Consequently, this significant marginalization has put mounting pressure on Pezeshkian to step forward and, in my opinion, deliberately employ such a tactic to regain his influence. Of course, we still shouldn't overlook one alternative option, that this isn't merely an isolated case, but rather the issue represents represents a broader, overall effort, meaning the entire regime's coordinated strategy to deliberately have Pezeshkian, acting as the senior executive figure of the regime, make this specific statement. The underlying goal would be to, in a way, manufacture confidence and project calm among loyal supporters, and deeply within their own internal ranks. Furthermore, it aims to effectively neutralize the negative propaganda generated by perceived enemies and hostile media outlets. However, despite this plausible theory, I think that the first possibility remains a significantly stronger one, that he and his dedicated media team sat down and, well, it's possible that this has gone to the brink of resignation many times, like, what am I doing in this system? But ultimately, he might have concluded, let me come and take the monopoly of quoting, commenting, and referencing the new supreme leader from the IRGC core and get ourselves into this game. I think these two possibilities, and with more certainty, one could say that the first possibility is more prominent in this regard.
This keeping Mojtaba Khamenei hidden for such a long time is slowly entering its third month. How can this be evaluated? Now, not only is he himself hidden, but if you've noticed, in the last week or two, Kalibaf himself is also only sending out voice messages.
In my opinion, this issue is primarily about the conditions that some international media might have also pointed to, meaning Mojtaba Khamenei has sustained very serious physical injuries that fundamentally require treatment. And also, as you mentioned, the security situation has reached a point where even Kalibaf is only using voice messages. And still, they've experienced two distinct waves of what they call a surprise over the past year, encompassing both the 12-day war and the prolonged 39-day war. During those initial waves, several key figures of the regime were unexpectedly killed. Because of this, they say maybe these current negotiations and Trump's so-called tighten and loosen tactics actually have a hidden trick behind them. They strongly suspect that there's direct coordination with Israel, and therefore the broader security issue is incredibly important to them right now. It could be a combination of these two, in my opinion. But one thing that shouldn't be forgotten is that, well, for the people of Iran, and even for the international community and countries involved with the Islamic Republic, the issue hasn't really changed much, meaning those figures, those individuals, from Hossein Tayyip to Zolgad to Ahmad Vaidi, it's as if they are Mojtaba Khamenei himself, meaning whether they rule in Mojtaba Khamenei's name, or Mojtaba Khamenei himself is in a physical condition where he can manage, can lead, and as, for example, people like Ezatollah Zarghami claim, to monitor even social media platforms much more actively than everyone else. In any case, regardless of what the final outcome of this ongoing issue might be, it makes no real difference for the everyday people of Iran or for the broader international community. However, you simply cannot ignore the undeniable fact that suddenly unveiling Mojtaba Khamenei, especially in a fragile situation where he is positioned as a decisive leader who can actually lead, well, that strategic move would be a massive propaganda trump card. Ultimately, it would provide an immediate injection of double energy and renewed enthusiasm for those few remaining loyal supporters of the regime. But the security issue, in my opinion, and his physical condition, I think that's the main reason for this secrecy, and it's also not clear how long it will take for them to be sure, for example, that the situation and conditions are normal and they can unveil him. But let me also add this point. The discussion about burying Ali Khamenei's body is also something that again emphasizes to us, reminds us that the issue of security for the Islamic Republic has not yet been resolved. Meaning, even if there is a situation with a few weeks of a temporary ceasefire, they still don't see it fit to hold a massive funeral for Khamenei. They cannot risk having key regime figures or foreign guests present to create a grand propaganda carnival, simply because they don't dare to do such a risky thing there. In my opinion, it is entirely obvious and somewhat natural that their profound fear of officially unveiling Mojtaba as the successor remains exactly as it was before.
Thank you, Nijad Bahrami, political analyst from Washington. The National Solidarity Organization for Iran has announced a protest gathering in support of the people of Iran in Washington, the U.S. Capitol. The organizers say this rally will focus on the release of political prisoners, free internet, and opposition to executions. The call for this gathering states that protesters will once again bring the voice of the Iranian people to the heart of the U.S. Capitol to show that the people of Iran are not alone in their struggle against the Islamic Republic. This gathering is scheduled for Saturday, May 9th at 2 p.m. outside the White House in Washington. Siamak Aram, political analyst and lecturer at Harrisburg University and one of the officials of the Solidarity Organization for Iran, has joined us from Washington. Mr. Aram, please tell us more about your plans for Saturday.
Hello to you and your viewers. We've been in Washington, D.C. for several weeks now, and it's an important city and region too. We've actually made these axes and issues the main points of our activities in various forms. There's the issue of internet freedom, which in a way has also suppressed people's rights, and fundamentally, in turn, has brought economic hardships and problems for the people. Aside from its political issues, where cutting off the internet limits the possibility of news and information reaching from inside, there's the issue of the freedom of political prisoners, regardless of their affiliation. All individuals in the prisons of the Islamic Republic, from Miss Fatima Saperi to Miss Narges Mohammadi, must be released. These are political prisoners of conscience, and more are continuously added to this list. The Islamic Republic's repressive apparatus is still ongoing, leaving many individuals under constant threat of arrest, mounting pressures, or confined to their homes. And there is actually the pressing issue of executions, which is being used as yet another inhumane and deeply violent tool by the Islamic Republic. This occurs alongside a multitude of other tools and various systemic forms of brutal repression. Ultimately, these are the main points of our organization's activities in Washington, D.C., in various forms, from protest performances in different locations, in front of the Iranian interests section, or in front of the White House and other places. Because fundamentally, whether in a wartime setting or in a setting of negotiations and interaction, human rights and issues related to the conditions of people in Iran and their freedom of expression, these political issues have always been lost. And actually, the effort of Iranians abroad is to actually bring these issues up more and highlight them.
Regarding the issues mentioned, especially executions and internet blackouts, is your goal primarily to inform? Or do you hope that in Washington, the White House and lawmakers will also take practical action? And if practical action is what you have in mind, what would that be?
Look, these political pressures are certainly not without tangible results. Following these advocacy efforts, we also had powerful calls to action right in front of the U.S. Congress. A bipartisan coalition of 8 representatives from various factions, including both Republicans and Democrats, came together. Ultimately, they actually introduced a crucial piece of legislation, a dedicated bill to Congress. That too is one of the vital activities that Iranians can actively support, especially those living in the U.S., by contacting their local representatives in Congress. This legislation specifically champions internet freedom in Iran. Furthermore, these very pressures actually help empower organizations and groups that are assisting with sending Starlink terminals or activating secure VPNs for Iran. It's not just America, too. There are other calls to action, too, this week and previous weeks, too, for the internet discussion, European governments, various places. This pressure needs to continue. Definitely, this struggle is a marathon, and a part of it is the continuity and persistence of pressure from Iranians outside the country, which has actually been in place since the beginning of this movement, and Iranians are using various tools to exert their pressure. This week, we've also deliberately chosen certain spots from in front of the White House, from high traffic areas. There will be a march, and we're going towards the European Union building. Coincidentally, this week and even last week, some embassies and institutions, including the European Union's representation building in Washington, D.C., are open to the public, and this actually allows the voice to be heard stronger and clearer. This is a continuation. This is a struggle. And people in Washington, D.C. have also chosen to stand with the people inside and try to send their help and support inside however they can.
Thank you, Siamak Aram, political analyst and lecturer at Wiesberg University, and one of the officials of the Solidarity for Iran organization from Washington. As I mentioned at the beginning of the program, the Wall Street Journal has reported that the Trump administration is considering resuming Operation Freedom to guide commercial ships through the Strait of Hormuz, and this action might begin as early as this week. Previously, some media outlets, including NBC News, had reported that Trump's Operation Freedom to open the Strait of Hormuz had been halted after Saudi Arabia and Kuwait objected to the U.S. using their airspace. NBC also wrote that Qatar was not informed of this plan beforehand. Marzia Husseini, our correspondent from the U.S. Congress, has joined us. Marzia, while initial reports indicated that these very objections from some regional countries, including Saudi Arabia, had led to the early halt of this Operation Freedom, it now appears that a green light has been shown from Riyadh and Kuwait to Washington.
Fardad, even if this green light has been given, and even if this operation has resumed, one important point should not be forgotten, and that is that the events of the past 48 hours showed what disagreement and what rift can exist between Trump and his strongest allies in the region, meaning these very Arab countries, regarding the continuation of this war, and it actually, in a way, highlighted the difficulty of Trump's job. We know that the initial reports were numerous and often contradictory. NBC stated that the reason for the halt of this operation and the Saudis' displeasure was that they had not been informed beforehand. On the other hand, a prominent internal analyst from Saudi Arabia published a clarifying tweet. That specific tweet actually became the primary source of argumentation for major Western media outlets. Consequently, they revised their articles and rewrote them from scratch, stating, no, the previous narrative was wrong. The Saudis were in fact fully aware at least half a day before this operation was announced by Trump on Sunday. They didn't have a problem either. Even after the Islamic Republic attacked the UAE, they weren't surprised or astonished. They were surprised when Trump refused to retaliate against the operation the Islamic Republic carried out on UAE soil. And this was where the Arab countries of the region understood how much they were actually paying for what Trump calls the art of the deal. As a result, they withdrew their support for Trump. Now it's being said that they've returned to this operation and are supporting Trump, but if the statements of those analysts inside Saudi Arabia and the regional countries are correct, this means that these countries have now convinced Trump that if the Islamic Republic attacks again, is Trump willing to defend these countries and carry out retaliatory attacks inside Iran or not? And this means that if Trump has given them such a promise and the Islamic Republic takes any action again, this is where the ceasefire ends. In a situation where, according to all American press, there is no pleasant option for Trump in the second option, meaning at the negotiating table. We know that what they're talking about now, this 14-point plan that the Islamic Republic has sent, just one of its articles is the release of at least $100 billion from the Islamic Republic's reserves. Trump, who has repeatedly criticized Obama for this very action, meaning the release of the Islamic Republic's funds, over the past 8+ years, is not willing to do such a thing himself. That's regarding the status of the provisions on the table. On one hand, the composition of the negotiating table has changed. The Islamic Republic already distrusted Kushner due to his close ties and investments in Israel, and now the addition of a new person to the table, who is also a strong supporter of Israel himself, has practically made the negotiators' composition even more negative. Consequently, the overall analysis of all press is that Trump specifically has no choice but to continue this Operation Freedom, which will certainly lead to the end of the ceasefire and the renewed start of conflict.
Thank you, Marzia Husseini, our Congress correspondent.
Breaking news.
I want to return to this news regarding the explosions in Iran. Several Iranian users sent us messages. One person from Bandar Abbas reported saying, just half an hour ago, on Thursday evening, I heard the sound of a massive explosion, but it's not clear where it came from. At the same time, it's also been reported in Kesh that there was an explosion sound at the 22 Bahman Pier, and the sky completely lit up. We've also received other similar reports from Bandar Abbas, from Kesh, and some other parts of southern Iran. But in the past few moments, Tasnim news agency, which is close to the Revolutionary Guard, has said that the sounds of explosions in the Strait of Hormuz, according to its sources, are related to operations by the Revolutionary Guard's Navy to warn ships that intend to pass through the Strait of Hormuz without permission. This explanation, or rather justification, from Fars Tasnim news agency, close to the Revolutionary Guard, says that the sounds of explosions heard in some southern Iranian ports are related to Revolutionary Guard operations to give a warning to ships that intend to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. According to information received by Afghanistan International, the Taliban and the Islamic Republic have collaborated to design a mobile phone application that increases the possibility of monitoring monitoring users in that region. This application has surveillance capabilities and can expose users' smartphones and other internet-connected devices to the Taliban's intelligence directorate systems. This report has been published while digital restrictions and online surveillance are on the rise in Afghanistan. My colleague, Razia Danish, is with us from our other studio in Washington. Razia, what impact can this issue have on the state of privacy and internet freedom in Afghanistan?
Yes, Fardad, just as you said, credible, informed sources have told Afghanistan International that the Islamic Republic has been secretly collaborating with the Taliban regime for quite a while now. They are working together to build a highly intrusive surveillance application. By unknowingly installing this software, it allows authorities to access all private data on mobile phones and any devices connected to the internet. This includes intercepted text messages, precise geographical locations, personal contacts, and detailed search histories across various web browsers. This alarming development is deeply concerning for the safety and ongoing activities of civil rights activists, independent journalists, and political opponents of the Taliban operating inside Afghanistan. As a matter of fact, during this period after the Taliban came back to power in Afghanistan, we've occasionally had troubling news of the arrest and detention of civil activists, journalists, and outspoken opponents of the Taliban, largely because of what they had published on social media. But now, it seems this isn't just a simple, isolated crackdown on digital dissent. Rather, it appears that a systematic policy of restricting freedom of expression, an area in which the neighboring Islamic Republic has a long history, is now actively transferring this oppressive experience to the Taliban. On the other hand, the Taliban themselves haven't been idle in the digital space. Now, the Bakhtar news agency, affiliated with the Taliban's Ministry of Information, has stated that they are actively trying to develop new software for keyboards. To accomplish this, they will definitely seek foreign collaborations and technical assistance. With the direct help of the Islamic Republic of Iran, China, and Russia, they aim to impose much stricter, widespread surveillance on Afghan internet users. Meanwhile, the prominent presence of the Islamic Republic in facilitating these internet collaborations is highly notable. Iran's established model of severe digital restrictions and strict online policies is effectively being exported to Afghanistan. It seems abundantly clear that the Taliban have taken this digital crackdown very seriously. As a matter of fact, during the time they were present in Afghanistan, their cyber users and activists were still campaigning on social media, especially on X and Facebook. But we can perhaps say that the Taliban really didn't have the experience that the Islamic Republic had. The issue of widespread filtering, the issue of internet restrictions, and also, well, what we're seeing now in Iran, that national internet. In Afghanistan, it was perhaps just 7 months ago that we experienced a severe fiber optic internet outage that lasted for several days. Fortunately, due to relentless advocacy and intense pressure exerted on the Taliban leadership, they ultimately lifted that digital filtering. But now, Afghanistan, a nation which itself has no strong legal framework to protect people's personal data and safeguard online privacy, has become the vulnerable subject of a dangerous new issue. We are currently seeing a situation where Iran is actively exporting its oppressive censorship experience directly to the Taliban. Fardad, I will get back to you shortly.
If you could briefly say, what's the reason for this collaboration? What connection can there be between Iran's experience in internet control and the Taliban's potential policies?
What observers are pointing out now is that this isn't just a simple transfer of technical data. Instead, it represents a transfer of restrictive digital governance, meaning if the Taliban were a bit hesitant at first, initially granting some more or less basic individual freedoms to Afghan citizens, their approach is rapidly hardening. Now, as time passes, and inspired by the authoritarian model they are observing in neighboring Iran, they're making far greater use of this censorship mechanism. For instance, following the January protests, we saw that the Taliban strictly warned all media outlets in Afghanistan that they are absolutely not allowed to cover any news related to the protests in Iran. And if you are to cover any news, it must only be through the channel of the official media of the Islamic Republic. We are seeing this collaboration more and more, from news coverage to these online collaborations we're seeing now.
Thank you, Razia Danish, my colleague, for joining us from our studio in Washington. Before the program ends, and we really don't have more than a minute left, let me just say that we're also getting more reports about sounds of explosions from southern parts of Iran. Some sources, including Vahid Online, are reporting sounds of explosions heard in Kesh, Mina, Bandar Abbas, Sandar Khamir, and Sirik on Thursday evening. Tasnim, the news agency affiliated with the IRGC, has reported hearing several explosions near Kesh Island and Bandar Abbas, writing that some sources are saying that some of these sounds are related to IRGC Navy operations, to warn certain ships about unauthorized passage through the Strait of Hormuz. But the number of these explosion sounds, it seems, is increasing, and naturally, our focus is on southern Iran. You can follow more news on our website, Iran International, social media, and of course on television in the coming hours. But for now, Program 24 ends right here. You can also catch the program again on YouTube a little later.